Alright, we're back in the US Music Revenues file, and by now you should have some ideas of the formatting tweaks that we can apply to our chart here to eliminate noise and facilitate understanding. But if you don't, feel free to pause the video now and try to think about it for a few minutes. Now, quick disclaimer before I get started, the formatting steps that I'm going to apply here are based on the best practices that we covered in the section, but they are still also subjective and down to some of my personal preferences and styles. So remember that you can always apply the best practices yourself and try to apply your own formatting. Just remember that all we're trying to do is reduce noise and increase clarity here as much as possible. That said, the steps that we're going to take are to remove the chart border and grid lines. We're going to try to clean up these axis labels and see if there's some way to get rid of this legend while still identifying which series is which. And before I actually do any of that, let's give our chart a title. It's maybe US Music Revenues by Format, just so that we know what we're looking at here. Alright, so to get rid of the chart border, I'm going to go to the Format tab with the chart selected, and in Shape Outline, select No Outline. And for the grid lines, we can simply select one, press delete, and that will get rid of all of them. So now we got the easy part out of the way, time to focus on our axis labels. And I'm looking at my y-axis here, and it is a little bit misleading, because you would think that it's going from $0 to $25,000, but if we look back at our source data, we know that this is actually 25,000 million. So this is taken a little bit out of context here. But what we can do is simply add an M at the end that signifies million, and then our users would know that it's going from 0 million to 25,000 million. So I'm going to select my y-axis with my mouse, I'm going to right click, go to Format Axis, and in the Axis options, I'm going to go to the number dropdown. Now you'll see that right now, the axis labels are formatted as currency, which is fine, but I actually want to apply my own custom number format. And all we really want is to add to the existing format an M at the end to signify that we're looking at millions of dollars. So I'm going to add one between quotations since it is a text string. Press Add, and now we're going from 0 million to 25,000 million. Now that is a little bit clearer, but I still think we're looking at a lot of redundant zeros here. In fact, 25,000 million is really just 25 billion, right? So what we could do is just get rid of these trailing zeros, change the M to a B, and then we'd be going from 0 to 25 billion, which is much clearer. So to do that, I'm actually going to go back to my Format Axis pane, and here in the custom format, I'm going to remove the M for now, and I'm going to add a comma after my formatting. And what that essentially does is that by leaving the space after the comma blank, we're basically telling Excel not to display the last 3 digits after this comma that we can see here. So if I press Add, you'll see that it removes those digits. Now all we need is to add our B for billions. Press Add one more time, and there we go. So from 0 billion to $25 billion. And we're looking at dollars in revenue, right? So we can also add through the Chart Design tab, Add Chart Element, a nice axis title, Music Revenue. We can just say revenue. Alright, now quick pro tip with the axis titles. I usually like to drag them to the top left, just because that's where people usually start reading the chart, and they'll immediately see the revenue tag here and know that we're looking at revenue figures. Again, you don't need to do that, that's just the way that I kind of like to format my charts. Alright, so now that we've taken care of the y-axis, let's take a look at the x-axis. We've got years from 1973 to 2019, and it looks like by default, because I'm guessing because of the size of the chart, Excel is basically skipping the even years here, and it's also making the text diagonal just so that it fits within this size. Now, I don't really mind skipping the years because it doesn't really decrease any understanding. We still know what we're looking at, but I'm not a huge fan of displaying text in the x-axis diagonally. I always like it to be horizontal, just for readability. So what we can actually do is just remove a few more years, and that will give us a space so that these are displayed horizontally. Now, unfortunately, there's no default setting in Excel that will allow us to tell it how many years to skip, but what we can do is actually remove them manually. So we could keep the first and the last years, and maybe just the decades in between, like 1980, 90, 2000, and 2010. So let's go back to our source data. We want to keep the first year, and we want to remove all these. We can simply delete them. You'll see they're removed here. This is already horizontal now, but it looks like we have some overlays. So let's continue to get rid of the rest of our labels here. Let's go back up. And that's actually looking pretty good. We can maybe make both of these a little bit bigger, just to make it a little bit more readable. But overall, I'm happy with the way my Y and X axis have turned out. So with that sorted, let's take care of this legend, because I don't want my user to look at the chart, see the blue, have to go over here, read that it's physical, then go back and then try to understand what the chart is telling them about the physical format. And honestly, most of the time, you really can just label things directly on the chart by adding text boxes. So let's do that. I'm going to select the chart, and in the Format tab, you'll see that we have this Insert Shapes menu. Grab a text box. Let's create it in here, and this is going to be my physical. And you'll see that since we inserted it through this menu and with the chart selected, this text box is actually a part of my chart. So if I move this, it will move along with it, which is pretty neat. So let's go back, maybe make it white, bold, and a bit bigger. So this is our physical format. And for my digital, I can actually press Control and hold it. And you'll see that it adds this little plus mark when I drag my cursor over the text box. And I can just drag and it will actually create a copy for me. Let's change this to digital. And there we go. So now we can delete our legend. We no longer need that. Let's move these down again. And there we go. So it looks like the formatting is in a pretty good spot now. We know exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at music revenues from 1973 to 2019 for physical and digital music formats. And we also get a clear idea of how the composition of these has changed over time. So it looks like the formatting that we applied is doing its job and making sure that the story is clear. That said though, all we're doing right now is showing the story. We're not telling the story to the viewer. So the next step is going to be to identify how we can use titles and data labels to tell a compelling story with this data. So again, try to think about what steps we can take to do that, and I'll see you in the next lecture.